Okay, Esther, here you go.
And did you find the record button?
I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I wonder why we have an echo. Any ideas, Margaret?
And see if that makes a difference.
Okay. Still an echo. Am I echoing for everybody?
I don't hear an echo.
I don't hear an echo.
Okay, well, I'll just deal with it. If I sound like I'm stuttering, it's because the echo's bugging me. The first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to look at baseline criteria for retention. And you can see that it's up. Hopefully you have that, the agenda up, and you can refer to that if you need to. But for the for retention, we came up with 5 main areas and then a few little subcategories. So the first one that we're looking at is the number of students retained at specific intervals compared with number enrolled after the drop add period. So what let's do is, I think everybody's got their well, what do you think? I guess we should talk about it first. What does everybody think? Does that look like a good thing to keep in? So Donna, what do you think?
You can come back to me. I was trying to figure out kind of how it would be used. So.
Okay. Greg, do you want to chime in a bit?
Well,
no, I think that's about as baseline as you can get, the number of students retained. That seems pretty essential to me.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty basic measure to see, you know, who would still be in a particular program or course over time. So is there anybody who thinks maybe that that's not a good measure? All right, let's do a raise of hands then. Let's just raise our hands if we do agree that that's a good measure. And it's the raised hand is on the computer under participants down at the bottom there. So Greg and I both have our hands raised. Rachel's got her hand raised.
I don't have a hand to raise, Esther, because I'm the moderator, so it gets a yes vote from me.
Okay.
I'm still trying to find the hands on my screen. For some reason, I can't find it.
So if you go to the top of the screen, of the WebEx screen, you can click on the, you've got that little menu bar that pops up and down.
Yeah, it's about doing Esther. Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Rob, how about you?
You know, I'm still kind of thinking about it. I'm just not really sure what we're measuring.
So what we're trying to do for retention is seeing whether or not we're retaining students.
And well, that's historical. You know, why are we measuring it now? Based on our programming, or the programs that we're offering, are we seeing a decrease
or an increase in the numbers enrolled, a decrease or increase in the number of people who are completing. So why are we measuring that? Are we measuring it against how tough our classes are, you know, that kind of stuff? So I guess I'm not seeing the big picture because, again, a lot of it's historical. We can pull that information out.
Well, you know, I think what would be telling is if we decide what intervals we're measuring. So let's say we did it 6 weeks into a program and looked at our retention rates, and if we saw that students with a certain profile, let's say veterans, that we were losing quite a few during that first 6 weeks, then we would be able to look at, gee, what kinds of, maybe we need different interventions, different types of support early on in the program. I'm just making this up. I don't know how it would pan out.
I think I'm kind of with Rob. I think the intervals would definitely come into play, and also it would be very different from program to program. So I'm not. I guess where I'm looking at is, I think there's value added if I look at my own program and compare it to my own program. But if we're trying to do any sort of consortium aggregation, I'm worried about that.
And I don't know that it would be an aggregated amount. I don't know if, Esther, if you were thinking that it would be. I'm thinking it would be, I agree, Donna, it would be most relevant to our individual programs.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's something that I know I'm interested in tracking over the course of the grant. And like you said, you know, looking at either different population groups, maybe even looking at different courses to see what improvements. It would be one way to measure and think about what kinds of improvements could reverse the numbers if I saw high numbers of attrition. So it's kind of just like an indicator. So let's see, who hasn't weighed in? Matt, you haven't weighed in. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think you guys probably know best as far as your students. I mean, I definitely think that, you know, from my perspective, that having different intervals where we're kind of tracking students against the amount enrolled and who's still in, that seems to me like it makes sense.
Okay, and Maria, how about you?
Hi, sorry, I came in late and I was just trying to absorb everything that was happening. Definitely, because I'm taking numbers now and we've lost students. If I go into like specifics, I could say we lost students in our pathophysiology classes. So very specific classes is where we would be losing students, and not so much as far as the full program.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, as far as retaining them and why they couldn't continue on to the next quarter, or if they have to repeat something. I think it would be if we had some type of percentage compared to the amount of enrollees that we have in the program. Like, for example, what's the completion rate of veterans compared with other students? If we had 28 people in our class and we have one veteran in there, and that's, you know, and he makes up a certain percentage of the class, and it's like if we were to lose that one student, then that would mean that we would lose completely. It would be a 0 as far as, so it depends how we're going to rate it, if we're going to do like a quantitative accountability, if we're going to base it on percentage rates, or if we're going to, I don't know how we're going to account for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as far as the first baseline goes, number of students retained at specific intervals compared with number enrolled, are we feeling, it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that have voted for it, and then we've got one person that Rob's not quite sure, and then 2 people that haven't, Matt and Maria. Okay, Matt raised his hand.
There, I just raised my hand.
Yeah. So it looks like this is going to be something, even though we have some questions, that we do feel like the majority of us do want to measure this. So we'll keep in this first one, number of students retained at specific intervals. So let's go on to the next one, which is, Maria, what you were kind of starting to get into, which is what is the completion rate of veterans compared with other students? Oh, so we should lower our hands. And Rachel, what do you think on that one with the veterans?
I think it's important to have a sense of how many veterans have completed. I mean, just for example, I know in our pharmacy tech cohort right now, we have 1 eligible spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if she doesn't complete, there's going to be a 0. So I think it's important to count, but it's going to be different at each school, and it's going to be different within each program, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and Rachel, your point, along with Maria's, they're almost, if we are measuring this, there needs to be a qualitative element too, where we can have notes that say, P.S. this was the only person in the program, so that if we're going on percentage rates,
absolutely,
yeah, that it doesn't paint the wrong picture.
Right.
Greg, what do you think?
Well, what I'm thinking is that, well, first of all, I guess I just don't know how important it is to keep track of that. But the big issue to me is whether or not this is one data element that is important for us to keep track of and to report on a regular basis, or if it's the kind of thing that we might want to, after the fact, be able to pose as a query to a database and get the answers on demand if we find that there's a need for it. I mean, hypothetically, sure, I can see that there might be some value in keeping track of a figure like this. Right now, the number of veterans participating in my program is low enough so that I don't think it would prove anything. But it might be the kind of question down the road as we begin to compare notes and look at what the trends are throughout all of our programs, that, yeah, we might want to go back and look at. But the big question to me is whether it's something that we keep on a regular basis and report on an ongoing basis, or is it the kind of thing we can just have in the database that we can query on demand.
Right, and if we decided the second, then that wouldn't be part of our purview as continuous improvement,
Okay.
right? And I know with some of the infusion programs that we have in terms of completion rate, that's going to be really hard to measure in terms of the length of the grant in order to make improvements, you know, if we're simply talking about completion rates. Margaret, what do you think?
Could you repeat that, Esther? Sorry.
Well, I'm thinking, you know, we're talking about the completion rate of veterans compared with other students.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things Greg was talking about was maybe we would just do it, you know, search the database at the end, because we will be gathering that data. So I had a couple of thoughts on that, and one was that if we wanted to just wait till the end to measure that, that's not really then part of the continuous improvement cabinet's purview.
Right. So we're definitely looking for ways to demonstrate continuous improvement. And I think even a bigger goal is if we come across practices that we've initiated and implemented as part of the grant that we find are particularly successful, it will be a nice showcase piece for all of us to point to as a result of this grant. But in terms of continuous improvement, yes, we would have to actively collect and report this data at different intervals.
Hi, this is Maria. I was just thinking of something especially when we're talking about vets. There used to be this evaluation system. It's called an OER. It's the Officers Evaluation System. And I was just thinking that, you know, to show improvement over a certain amount of job that they would come in, sometimes they would get graded almost or scored lower because they wanted to show that there was room for improvement at the second evaluation. Does that make any sense? Instead of saying that we're already having, like, we're doing, like, we wanted to recruit 28 vets, we got 28 vets, but we were only able to keep 2, you know, and it just shows this really down curve, you know, but compared to we recruit 1, you know, we end up getting 5. I think if we start low and over the time as the grant progresses, we're able to show an increased value. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, except that we all have retention numbers, so we certainly don't want to start low on the number of students retained. But I understand the concept.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that we should do something that's unreasonable, but and we should. I think breaking it down, depending on the course, on what the course is, I think that if we're going to look at the completion rate of veterans compared to with other students, depending if it's a quarter system, of how many people actually entered the program from day 1 compared to, you know, that we would have like a 50% retention rate by the end of the quarter. Does that make sense? So if that 1 person or 2 people came in, so if our aim is to at least keep 50% of our vets that are retained through that program, then we'd still we'd still have 50% left.
So I think with this, we're not required to set a target. It's just demonstrating improvement over time. So the goal would be if our retention rates during 2013, 2014 were at 60%, we would expect that the following year they would be higher.
Oh, so we're just looking at a statement here. We're not putting values on anything. Is that what we're saying here?
No, we're not. We don't have set targets other than the outcomes projections we all came up with for our school, but we're just, the whole spirit of this is to just demonstrate continuous improvement. The process of we're measuring things, we're looking at ways to improve, and then we're improving.
I see. Okay, then I give a thumbs up that we should look at the completion rate of veterans compared with other students.
Okay, I think that's a majority.
Oh, yeah.
Donna or Rob, any additional?
Yeah. I think the only thing I'm concerned with on the veterans, because I did this kind of study several years ago for a different grant.
Yeah.
And that was when we had the NSF grant. We were looking at retaining women and minorities in the IT field.
Uh-huh.
I guess we're, just because of knowing that kind of how that all flushed out, to me, it's not just a veteran question. It might be that, you know, one school or one group of students might be, you know, 60-40 male to female, and it just happens that a lot of veterans were dropping out that time, and it might be that they were mostly dropping out mostly because they were female and we weren't attracting the females and stuff. So I think there's a lot of dimensions in there, and just
that's true.
The veteran piece with, I guess where I'm leaning is if we're collecting all this other data, veterans, gender, ethnicity, all of that, then we should look at that as a holistic package to say, if we're going to track retention, then to say, are we seeing any issues in any categories, not just specifically saying that it was because they were a veteran that they dropped. It might have been something else.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Any comments on that? So instead of saying the completion rate of veterans, it should be broadened to say the completion rate of students. I'm not coming up with the words right now, but across different profiles.
Right. And I just know that it's still historically correct. I mean, it's true that we're not retaining as many females in the IT field, and we're still not retaining as many minorities in the IT field. So my hypothesis is that's still going to be an issue more than the fact that they're a veteran. And so I guess I'm sure it's opened up to all of the demographic data that we're collecting, not just isolating on a piece that might not be the correct variable.
So, and I think that's an excellent point. What would you all think about broadening that to looking at the completion rate, examining different demographic profiles?
I think that should be done, yes.
I agree.
This is Matt.
Rachel agrees.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say real quick. I know that there's obviously some benefit to doing it across the board, kind of like you're suggesting, Margaret, but because the grant statement of work is written in such a way to target veterans and TAA students, do we feel, and I'm just thinking out loud here, throwing it out, do we feel like we need to, even though somebody might drop or not complete and it had nothing to do with their veteran status, do we feel obligated to still kind of follow up with them and keep like a special category for tracking those individuals?
I think it would still, we should still look at veteran status as one of the dimensions. Yes, how do the rest of you feel about that? But as Donna pointed out, it can be, we can factor in other elements also because we may see trends. Donna mentioned something like a female may be a greater indicator than just veteran status.
I think a complete profile would be helpful, but you guys need to keep in mind, the VRAP is coming to an end. So many veterans that are coming into programs are finding out that they're not going to be able to have funding for programs that they're currently enrolled in.
And, actually this also points to some sort of exit document when we know students are dropping out to find out a reason. What they say is the reason why they're not staying.
Right.
That might be hard.
What was that, Greg?
I was just thinking that trying to conduct an exit interview or to get some documentation on people after they've left the program might be difficult to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we won't get 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to say that, we're following up with the students, and we are finding out the ones that have dropped out of our program or failed out, or because we're finding more behavior issues. We're actually tracking all that as we go. So there are students that we're seeing that are not going to be continuing on because they have poor attendance. And we're on top with the instructors of what's happening, and actually almost right before they're able to register for next quarter, we know exactly what's happening, that their families, they're having problems with families. And actually the students have been, I would say, almost great to the point of providing us with any follow-up information by either calling or email them just to find out why they're not returning to the program. So, but I think you could get maybe not 100%, but for us, we're finding almost 99% of the students why.
That's great.
Actually, we know exactly why anybody who has not continued on.
Okay. Well, is there anybody with the changes in the second bullet demographic profile, including veteran status. Is there anybody who has objections to number 2? Okay, so maybe we should move on to number 3.
Yeah, so number 3, what is the completion rate of students in this program compared with your institution's overall completion rate?
Donna, in your, it's great that you've done this on a previous grant. Did you include this statistic in?
I think we looked at it, but it was I think it's more relevant for us to look at the retention compared to other IT degrees.
I see.
Because you know, to compare a professional technical and especially a highly technical program against like an English major, you know, it's like talking apples and oranges. But to compare a programming degree against this now health IT degree, I think gives some, you know, maybe or against our whole CIS program, to say, is this new degree retaining better or worse than the rest of the CIS program? And that's how we ended up reporting for our other grant.
So maybe this is not a useful measure then. Maybe we should take it out.
But it could also be, like, for example, I know there's several nursing programs that are being infused, or a couple office medical assistant programs across the consortium being infused. It might be an interesting comparison to compare like programs to see if there's something that flushes out of that. But you know, like my degrees, even though it's a certificate, you know, we've had these conversations. Mine's really embedded into almost really an 8-quarter program. So to compare that against like I say, a 3-quarter program, it's not the same comparison, you know. Yeah. You know, funding alone will cause some of ours to drop out. Just, you know, trying to hold on to funding for 8 quarters.
It does seem, as you're talking about this, it seems like there's a very good chance of comparing apples to oranges in trying to do this. So maybe it would be better just to remove it. Any comments on that? Any opinions?
I would like to see how our program does compare to other programs here in the school. I can also compare it, I guess, with the other programs in the Allied Health Department, but I still would like that completion rate just to see overall, I guess, more for the school.
Okay.
That we have been successful, you know, and that we are, because even though it's different, we may have developed a system here that to be shared.
Well, I wonder if we could leave it open, that, or if it gets too muddy, if people who want to compare it to the overall institutional rate can, and those who would like to compare it to a similar program can go that route. Esther, do you think that would get too muddy?
I think if we were clear in our reporting, I think it would be fine. I think that would work. Sort of, what is the completion rate of students in this program compared with similar programs or your institution's overall completion rates?
So how does that sound to everybody?
I personally feel like this question is geared more for the new programs opposed to the infused. For someone that's creating a new program, I think that would be valuable.
Well, I think the one thing that'll be different about even our infused programs, though, is the ramped up support services. So I think it would be interesting to see what the impact of our support services is.
Yeah,
we hope it'll have an impact.
Yeah, if you're going to dive into that extra level, I can see how that would work.
Yeah, Margaret, this is Donna, I was going to jump in on that because to me that's where there really is some value added is with our instructional support and navigator to see how that would compare against programs that are trying to, maybe even other new programs that don't have that piece written in.
Right.
Especially if we want to have a chance of fighting to keep something like that after the grant's over.
Uh-huh. And our hope is that in addition to demonstrating continuous improvement is that hopefully some of these measures will show the value of those services. So with modifications to that third bullet, do you all feel like you'd like to keep it in if we have the option to compare it with similar programs instead of overall institutional numbers?
I would like to compare it with similar programs. You know what? I was thinking I'd also like to compare retention rates with historical retention rates from the same program.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Well, you were talking about the effect of the support services and the resources the grant brings to it. You would like to think that would have a positive effect on retentions.
Yes, you would.
And that demonstrates continuous improvement. And I do think that data are available. I know that our instructor has talked before about the retention rates in his program. I think he has that.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. Shall we, let's see, is that within the sphere of continuous improvement? It's a little to the left of it, but I think it would be really interesting to see.
Yeah, that's purely just getting the numbers. But I think it's a little different than this third one.
And this would just be for the infusion programs, the pre-existing programs.
Right.
Yes.
Compared with historical.
Although some of the IT programs are just adding some healthcare components, so actually some of the IT programs could do it too.
Something like that question that I just added, we may have to clean it up a little bit.
So are there any in the list of those 4 that people feel shouldn't be there? Or let's phrase that another way. If these 4 are acceptable, could you guys raise your hands or chat in the chat box? Okay. Let's see. We have just about everybody. Donna, are you okay with these 4?
Yeah, I was still trying to, I raised my hand just now.
Okay.
I guess the piece I'm still struggling with is, are we only comparing ourselves to ourselves, or are we then also comparing against the consortium? Because to me that would make a difference on how the questions should be worded.
Comparing, you mean comparing our programs with other programs in the consortium?
Right. So in other words, like is Pierce College's retention better or worse than another college's, and that doesn't make sense. And so I just want to make sure that it really is against ourselves.
We weren't looking at comparing programs, you know, with each other.
Okay. Good. Okay.
All right, and Rob, does this look? Do you have any comments either way on this one, these 4?
No, I raised my hand, but I'm still kind of holding back.
Okay. All right.
I'll make one comment. So just like every time I make a comment, it's a negative one. Right now we have a problem with our networking folks, which one my program falls under. The problem is they leave prior to graduation because they're getting a job, okay? Now, if it's a negative that my people are leaving prior to completing a program, you know, it's a problem we're having right now with our report card for the program. You know, it doesn't really accurately measure how well the student is doing. They got a job, they're leaving. They already have a certificate because they take their different tests as they go through different programs, and they bail out. Okay, but in a sense, they're a completer. They got a job. So I have a lot of background with this stuff, and so I've been through these conversations many, many times before. So it's probably better if I just sit back and listen.
Rob, I'm going to jump in and support you on that, though, that as long as we word it so that either it's a retention means graduated or employed, because, yeah, since that's kind of our end goal is to get these people back to work in the field that we're training them for, if they're successful before we finish with them, I don't consider that a failure either.
Yeah.
And it may, I know what I understand you're pointing to, you know, making us look bad based purely on numbers. And Donna, that's a good suggestion to make sure it's clarified that people left because of employment. I think the other thing it points to is some educating the students on the long-term value of degree completion, which, you know, may or may not make a difference, but it's worth a shot.
Right. Well, and we can work on cleaning up the language a little bit in these to maybe make some things more clear. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is the 5th bullet point, services provided and impact on retention. So the specific services, the first one is, was there a goal-setting meeting with the student prior to or at the start of the program? Did the student attend an orientation? What was the frequency of meetings with the student? What resources were provided to address barriers to completion of the program? And if the student is a veteran, did he or she participate in veterans events? So looking at these 5 bullet points under here, we want to see if that pretty much captures what we're looking for, if there's anything missing, or if there's anything in there that shouldn't be. So just take a couple of minutes and look those over. Yeah,
Esther,
go ahead, Margaret.
This is Margaret, and I just wanted to add that the thinking with this was that if we have a non-completer and we've gathered this information in those sub-bullet points, that we may be able to see some trends among non-completers. If we found that, you know, there was a higher proportion of students who didn't have a goal-setting meeting who end up leaving, you know, something like that. So that was the thinking behind this.
What exactly is the goal-setting meeting that you're talking about? Getting them enrolled, or what exactly? Well, just getting their certificate, or?
There's the model I had mentioned at some point in one of our meetings is this organization called Inside Track. They basically are colleges outsource to them some coaching, individual one-on-one coaching with students, and one of the things they do is right from the get-go, they talk with students about long-term and short-term goals, and they remind them of those goals throughout to keep them on track. And their results, there was about a 15% higher retention rate in the students that received this coaching. So that's what I'm talking about. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't any more specific as far as goal setting. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but of course Adriana may know this because she used to work there. Does Inside Track work with community colleges, or they only work with four-year universities?
You know, that's a good question, Rachel. I'm not sure. I know they approached us, so I'm assuming they work with community colleges because I got a sales call from them. That's how I learned about them.
Okay, because the only schools that Adriana and I have spoke about were four-year universities on the East Coast, but that might have just been her district or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they were approaching a lot of the schools who received these TAA grants.
Okay.
This is Donna.
So basically a meeting. Oh, sorry, Donna.
No problem. I was going to ask on the second bullet, but if you're on the first bullet, I'll be quiet for a minute.
I was still on the first bullet. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the goal-setting meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Would an advising meeting?
Yes, an advising meeting that talks about their short and long-term goals.
Okay.
My only thing is the prior to the start of the program, because if it's something that from day one after orientation and we talk about, then I can definitely meet up with students. We can definitely track that, but not until they enroll into the program can I track that.
So it says meeting with student prior to or at the start of the program. Would that be?
So it's like, I guess maybe first quarter. I guess they have to already be enrolled and past the add drop period. That would be the person that I'd be interested in gathering that data from. So it would have to be past add drop.
Okay. It should probably be.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say you could probably state it as prior to the completion of their first quarter.
I think, the research that I've seen says that early intervention is key with students, so I think it would be important to have those meetings early on. But I don't know, some of the student navigators may have more insight into this. I only know it from an academic sense, looking at research.
Well, my part is if they enroll for the program and we set up a meeting that, the first week and all of a sudden their money didn't come in or something happened and they dropped out of the program, within that week, or this was not the program they thought, like they don't want to deal with blood. We've actually had people drop out because they didn't know you deal with blood. And so seriously. And so
in a hemodialysis program.
No, for medical assisting.
I mean, medical assisting, yeah.
Yeah, so they didn't know. We have to give needles. They didn't know this. So yeah. So that's why I'm just more concerned about who actually steps in that, I guess, within the week. I guess, well, the reason I was saying after.
What about 4 weeks? What about within the first 4 weeks?
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would work for me.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Within first 4 weeks of program start?
Yes.
Because that way, if a student needs time management skills or, and maybe we should say, maybe we should broaden the goal setting. Oh, you already did, Esther, thank you. Advising meeting with students, yeah, because some may need study skills, some may need time management skills.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that first item?
But this is kind of like a side note of what we're doing right now. We implemented a study buddy program, and we have our student instructional support person that meets with every single student that's enrolled for a few minutes just to make sure that everybody's on track. And with the study buddy program, they're actually matched up with different students, and the students to make sure that they're on top of their homework and what they're having problems with as far as like a particular class, and they just answer these quick questionnaires, and so the instructional support person doesn't spend hours going through certain questions and goals. And we're starting to see that it's being successful, and the instructors are seeing really good, they're hearing good feedback, and the students are on track as far as tests and quizzes. So it doesn't have to be time consuming is what I'm trying to let you all know about.
And you guys have a slightly different model where the person is really in the classroom.
Yes.
A lot of the time. Yeah, and I think that's broad enough, a goal-setting advising meeting that could probably include the way your support staff work. Any other comments on that first item? Okay, how about the second item? We're probably, most of us probably haven't gotten as far as scheduling an orientation unless you're with an infusion program that already has one.
Yeah, that was going to be my question when I was going to start talking before, is, how are we defining orientation? Is it, is it the college?
And we really haven't.
Is it the college's orientation? Is it our program orientation? We don't do a group thing with our students until it's time for registration. And we use that as a, okay, here's everything you need to know since the last time I saw you, which was, last quarter, or when you had your individual, first bullet kind of meeting. But do we have to have a formalized orientation, I guess is my question.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a grant requirement, but if we put it on this list, unless we're talking about any kind of orientation, even as you mentioned, by your department or by your institution, I don't know, what do you all think about that? Do you want to commit to an orientation? Do we want to have it be just the school's orientation, or do we want to take it out?
Do other schools have like an information session that students sign up for outside of an orientation?
A lot of them have new student orientations, most colleges.
Okay. I was just curious because our student navigator has an information session prior to a student even enrolling into a program. So in the information session, we give them kind of like what to expect before they get in, and then after they register into the program, we have an orientation of like list, books, supplies, who to contact if you need financial aid and money. But I think if everybody was doing that, that would be measurable. But if not everybody's doing that, I don't think it should be measurable then.
What do you all think? Do you want to include just, did they attend a school orientation, not necessarily your program specific? Want to raise your hand if that's a yes? Looks like people would like to ditch this one. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's too ambiguous.
I'd like to ditch it based on experiences around here.
You think that it doesn't have much of an impact, Donna? In retrospect, we should probably have brought in the student navigators on this meeting.
I had a student that attended our college. I mean, this is just one of those flukes, but I had a student that attended the college orientation last week. Part of their goal was to walk them through the whole process and get them to an advisor to do their initial advising. Well, they sent them to a generic advisor who set them up an ed plan for my degree, and signed them up for fall quarter with generic, like Englishes and maths and stuff, and missed the fact 2 CIS courses they were out of the sequence for an entire year. And it just was a fluke. I caught that when I was just checking enrollment numbers. So right now. Maybe I want to know if they were in orientation.
So, not looking like a real valuable addition to the student experience. Okay, so maybe we take this one out.
Yeah. Okay, nobody yelled at me, so it's gone. So the next one, what was the frequency of meetings with the student? I like it. I think it's a good measure.
Yeah. Is this with the navigator? Or
Either the navigator or the instructional support person.
Okay.
The only thing is we have to show an increase, correct?
No. So what we would be looking at is trying to identify trends. So if we looked at 10 non-completers and we found that 9 of them only had 1 meeting with anybody, we could point to that as, hey, maybe that's a factor. If we look at retention rates and the students who were retained, a lot of them had frequent meetings. So that's the angle we're coming at it from.
Okay.
So in some sense, you're right, Maria. If that was the trend that we noticed, then on an individual basis, yeah, maybe we do need to increase the frequency. But not on a global, you know, so many meetings per student or something.
So any objections to that one? Okay.
All right.
How about the next one? This one might be too vague.
This is Donna again. When I read that one, the thing I would be wanting to know, based on some conversations y'all and some other people have pitched in, and what I've been seeing here is the most common reason I've lost students so far is they haven't been able to get their funding together. And that's not a resource I can do anything about.
Right.
If they're eligible for funding and I got them to funding and we got all the paperwork done in time, then I have some control over it. If they're not eligible for funding and they can't find their own sources, then it's out of my control completely. So as long as that's something that can be tracked separately. I had one student that I have worked with for 3 quarters now, really, the frequency of meetings, a lot of them, and she's dropped out. But I contacted her the other day. It's kind of like, okay, you didn't tell me you were dropping. What happened? She said, well, I got hired by a healthcare company, which was good. But she said, and once I'm employed there for 18 months, they'll pay for my college. So I'm waiting 18 months. So
yeah.
That's a good thing. Now, she don't count as, so it's, it's that it would count against me that I wasn't retained, yet it was a funding issue that she found a successful way to get funding that threw her out of my program for now. So I would like to know, because the resources that are in my control, which are, like I said, if they're eligible for funding and we got them to it, but if it's student funding, then it's not a resource I have control over.
Right.
But maybe it's just the way the question's worded.
And I think the way it's worded is a little too vague. That would be my handiwork there. What was I thinking? Maybe we should take it out.
I was wondering if we should have specific resources listed under that we wanted to measure.
Like resources like financial resources, maybe social resources like counseling resources, because especially with counseling and veteran services, that would help out a lot. That we distribute these resources to the students, transportation resources, and just list it.
Yeah, we could. And maybe we could do it in a way that doesn't make it onerous to track.
Right, so do we do categories or do we do specific resources? If we do categories, then we don't have to think of every single resource or the top 5 or whatever. But they would have to be very clear and differentiated. So
Categories.
Maybe we could put together a list and run it by the group.
I'm tracking it now with ours, and what we have listed is career advising, community resources, financial assistance, job resources, scholarship assistance, and tutoring. And then we actually list an other. That's what we're currently tracking.
Would you mind sending us that list, Maria?
Oh, sure, sure.
Okay, and maybe we could add some of the things that I found in research, like time management, study skills, and anything else anyone else would like to add.
okay, so what I'll do on that one is, it sounds like we want to leave it in, but it sounds like we want to expand it. So when I send out the meeting notes, I'll send it out as an action item for us to look at more closely. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay. So then the last one, if the student is a veteran, did he or she participate in veterans events? I like it.
Again, this is something I've heard appears to have an impact on retention and completion in the veteran community, but I don't know whether that's true or not.
I'm going to say no on this one. One of the reasons, it's not that, it's one thing to get veteran resources, but I know sometimes the veteran population, sometimes they don't want to do like the events. We had a Memorial Day event. So it all comes down to more specific, what exactly you're talking about as far as events. If it's a social event
for veterans on campus.
Yeah, I would not want to measure this, and I wouldn't even want to ask them if they did attend.
I agree with Maria. I don't really like that question.
Yeah, you would have to go out and ask them. You couldn't, there wouldn't be an easy way to have been tracking that.
Unless we all host the events and see who comes.
Right.
You know, I'm thinking that before we totally set this in stone, that it would be good to run this by the student navigators to see if they have any other thoughts to add. Does that sound okay to everybody? Anyone have any objections to that?
So send this list as we've changed it to the student navigators and get their ideas.
Right, just to see if they have any thoughts before we set it in stone.
Okay, let's raise our hands if we agree with that.
Okay.
Rob, I saw you raise your hand. Okay. We are, it looks like we're right at 2 o'clock, so we're out of time. So we'll continue with PLA next time. And we've got Maria working on faculty development. So I don't know, we'll get to that in the next few meetings as well.
Yeah, sorry, I think I'm going too deep into it.
It's harder than it looks.
Be less conscientious, Maria.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay, so yeah, so I'll get some meeting notes out. I'll also send around this information, or Margaret will send it around to the student navigators and instructional support specialists, and then we'll just continue on. I'm not sure when our next meeting will be, but I'll probably be sometime in July on that off Wednesday from our PM meetings. All right.
Thank you all so much. It's
thank you. Have a great day.
A lot of great ideas.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.